Good afternoon or evening, ladies and gentlemen, boxing fans around the world. Of course, I'm going to be doing a little bit of interim coverage for some of these signature fights. So I would follow up on predictions and things that I made about the big fights. I'm only focused on the big fights. There's a lot of action. There's not enough time for me to cover everything. So I'm only going to talk about the big fights, just to be clear. So let's go down the list. And we're going to this first episode, we're only going to start with Chris Eubank Jr. following up against Liam Williams. This was the fight, the grudge match. This was the one that if you go back to my prediction, I specifically said one thing, which was it was going to be a interesting styles match. It was. I predicted that Eubank would be largely the one trying to press the action. That mostly happened, but Eubank, because for those that don't know, Eubank, of course, is mostly being trained by Roy Jones, and it seemed like Roy has instilled more of a preservation style into Eubank, looking for shots, waiting for opportunities, and that kind of stuff. And we saw that in the fight. Now, I think where Eubank gets criticism, if you were to read highlights of this, if all you did was read highlights, you're going to be like, okay, Eubank dominated him. And on the scorecards, it was dominant in performance overall. But, and I'm not going to say that Eubank's regressed because that's not fair at all. I do think he's advancing as a boxer, but I think he's losing, in my opinion, some of the appeal that he should have at his age and his level right now. I don't think he's where I would like to see him. Early on, when Eubank Jr. Next Gen, when he launched and when he was doing his thing, it was clear that he was trying to be very close to what his dad was, which is basically kind of like a serpent, right? He would wait for shots and he would try to take you out. And for whatever reason, he was never able to, like, it almost seemed like he didn't have the power of his dad, even though it looks like he should. He was never able to get that one punch, brutal knockout. He had a couple, but he's never able to really been able to get people out of there. So in this fight, we saw Eubank was looking for counters. We saw that Eubank was doing combinations. It was a very close stylistic change in him, more leaning towards a Roy Jones type style. And maybe that works good for him in a preservation form. I'm just saying that I'm skeptical that it's going to hold up because if he doesn't really have the power, like if he's able to do that to somebody like Liam Williams and he was able to get good shots off, that's fine. But I think hitting Liam Williams with that stuff is different than hitting somebody else that's more durable. Like I'm not sure that any of the stuff that I saw there would have any noticeable effect on somebody like Golovkin, who Eubank called out. It just seemed like, and maybe he was just fighting down to the level of Williams, because it wasn't like Williams was in there to just take a check. Williams was trying, and he got some really good shots. He was able to rattle Eubank a couple times. He was able to, stun Eubank a couple times. So it's not like Williams was ineffective. It seemed like just stylistically, I did say it was going to be an interesting styles match, and that we saw. Now, I also predicted, because I had a sense that the ref would kind of intervene and potentially stop the fight when it seemed like it was wrong. With this many drops, if it was any other ref, honestly, any other ref, I could have seen a stoppage. Just jump in there and stop it. Like if it was like a Tony Weeks level ref that just was trigger, I could see a stoppage just because it's one guy looks like he's not in the other guy's class because it wasn't really close on the cards. So I guess I'll say kudos to the ref for letting it go to the distance and giving the Williams the chance to pull it out. And of course, it goes to the 12th and Williams tries, but he basically danced. He basically gave away the 12. So I'm not going to say it was a boring fight. I don't think it was a boring fight. I think it was an interesting fight. I think it was a fight that told us Styles played strong. I will say that Eubank accomplished the one thing I like out of boxing matches, which is that on paper, it looks like it should be a 50-50 fight. And then one guy goes in there and proves that that guy's not in his class. He did that, and I appreciate that. I just think for me, I understand his style and I understand what he had to do to adapt in order to get wins, especially after what happened with George Groves. It just feels like a step back for him because I don't know. It just seems like he's been promoted. Eubank has been promoted so much for so many years as dominant and power, get the guy out of there, knockout power. And there's also that standard bearer of being the son of Chris Eubank, right? English. But I think in the broad spectrum of the fan base, it's a disappointing performance. And that's probably not fair because he did what he needed to do and he did it very well. And he proved that Williams was nowhere close to him stylistically. But then you compare him against other fighters. Like if we look at the style that he fought here, and we say, let's book Eubank Jr. versus Saunders, current day Saunders. I don't think the style that Eubank just did would be as effective against somebody like Saunders because Saunders is more fundamentally sound. Even now, even after his smashed face, if we look at his style against somebody like Andre, I don't think he lands hardly anything on Andre with that style because Andre, he's elusive. So I guess what I'm saying is that it would work against somebody who's coming at you, who's aggressive, coming forward. But even like Golovkin would come forward and he would land, but I don't think it would have much effect because we've seen that his power doesn't seem to be there when it's somebody that's durable, tough. And Liam Williams just didn't have the chin. And plus, he was getting caught with shots he didn't see. And the combinations were kind of brutal, but Golovkin's not going to succumb to a lot of that. At least we don't think so. So, anyway, that's the fight here. Chris Eubank Jr. versus Liam Williams. I don't say it's a terrible fight. I don't think it's a bad fight. I think it's a decent fight. It's just unfortunately, for whatever reason, the adaptation of his style under the tutelage of Roy Jones in the eyes of the mainstream. I'm talking the boxing mainstream. I think is going to feel like a step back and feels like he's not ready for the upper echelon. And I don't think it's that. I think it's the style. Like there has to be times when you're able to pull it out, go out there and just get the guy out of there. He tried, but he didn't try the way I think he should have tried is my takeaway on that one. Eubank Jr. versus Liam Williams. That one's a wrap. Eubank wins it. It's not close on the cards. 4 knockdowns for Chris Eubank. Young Chris Eubank. It's an impressive win in my eyes, just not what we wanted to really see. Of course, we now still have to see more fights happen tonight. I will say for right now, everything's living up to the hype as far as the undercards and the main. Everything's up to the hype. We haven't had too many bad fights. Like they've been pretty decent outings. Nothing that's been like putting people to sleep or any of that kind of stuff. I think we gotta step up a little bit as far as the knockouts, maybe. But generally speaking, they've been decently exciting. I believe the next set of fighting events is going to be, I believe it's going to be Quadras is next. It's either Quadras or Once Upon a Time, but I'm pretty sure it's Quadras based on DAZN because DAZN's usually earlier. Either way, I'll keep an eye out, and once I see those, I will check back in with you guys.